Well, thank you very much for having me again. It seems like this has been a very long tradition, but it's something that I look forward to, and I hope you do as well. How did my new good friend Sebastian Lemaire do? Did I miss his presentation? Was he the block present? Did he do well? Okay. So that's a little extra pressure on me. That's fine. Oh, there he is. We are very happy to have nothing against Yves Perron, but we're really lucky to have Sebastian there as well. He's been a great addition to the team, and really enjoy working with Sebastian. Actually, keep this to yourselves. We haven't made this public, but Sebastian is actually coming and playing hockey with the Conservative MP Shinny on Wednesday nights. So, yeah, so it shows you how much respect that I have for Sebastian that we're letting him come play hockey with us. And if he doesn't do exactly what I want, there's a cross check to the back. Well, again, thank you to the Canadian Federation of Agriculture and all of you in this room, and certainly President Keith Currie for the invitation to be here and let us share our perspective from the conservative side of things. And I'm certainly proud to be here with you today and certainly representing the farmers, ranchers, and producers right across this country. Certainly not in my own riding of Foothills, who are, no offense to all of you in this room, but some of you are my constituents, and you are the most important people in this room. But I do welcome the opportunity to try and advocate and speak for producers right across this country in every link in that supply chain. You all have a very important story to tell, and your issues are just as important as the next person beside you. And I really like the theme of the AGM this year about Let's Grow Canada, building the future for Canadian agriculture. I couldn't agree more with that theme, because I believe that Canadian agriculture is a success story that we should be championing and talking about, and not managing and overburdening with red tape and regulations. I'm also proud of the incredible record that you have in terms of sustainability, environmental protection, embracing innovation and technology, reducing emissions while at the same time improving production. Now, certainly I would think all of us in this room would agree that we can always do better, but that is one of the strengths of Canadian agriculture, is you are always willing to embrace new ideas, new techniques, whether that's minimal till, 4R nutrient stewardship, precision agriculture, trying out new machinery and new technology. I think that's what sets Canadian agriculture apart compared to our global allies and certainly our global competitors. But we can, like I said, we can do better. We are now number 9 in the world in terms of food production and food exports. Now, many times you say, oh, well, like the Olympics, we're in the top 10. That's kind of Canada in cross-country skiing. We're in the top 10. But I want to be the hockey team. I want to be in the top 3. I want to be on the podium. We were number 5 not that long ago. We've dropped to number 9. So although that's still something to be proud of, I think that also shows that we are going in the wrong direction. And things need to be done and things need to be addressed to reverse that trend. And before the election, I think just about everybody in this room, in one time or another, I asked you, give me your 5 priorities. Give me the 5 things that you can all work on together. So, 5 things that I think all of agriculture can agree on, that had we had the honor to form government, that we could implement quickly under a conservative government last spring. And although it's never easy to get agriculture to agree on a number of things, I thought we could do well to come up with 4 or 5. And those 4 or 5 things were fairly unanimous across everyone who worked with us to come up with those ideas. Number 1 is we wanted the agencies, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and PMRA, to start working with agriculture and not against agriculture. We needed to have a culture shift within those agencies. They needed to be put into agriculture as an example of maybe something that could be done. We needed to harmonize regulations and reduce red tape to ensure that we could meet that opportunities and those potentials. We need to reduce taxes. We need to eliminate the carbon tax to ensure that our farmers were economically viable. But we also need to put a priority on research and innovation within AAFC. Unfortunately, we didn't have the honor of forming government with Prime Minister Pierre Poilievre, but I do want to say that we haven't given up on trying to reach and address those priorities that you in this room put forward. However, in my presentation today, I think I'm going to highlight that the current government is, and I'm not naive. I'm pretty sure you shared those same priorities with my Liberal colleagues, saying these are the things, if the Liberals get to form government again, these are the things we want you to focus on. Now, I'm fairly confident that your feedback that you gave to the Liberal members was not that we would like to maintain the status quo with CFA and PMRA. We would like to keep burdening us with red tape and more regulations and higher taxes. I'm certain you didn't say we would really appreciate if you cut funding to research and innovation and started shutting down research centers. I don't think that was the message that you shared with my Liberal colleagues before last year's election. However, that's exactly what's happening. So I think there's a very strong contrast between what I heard and what I think our priorities should be, compared to what I'm assuming the Liberals also heard, but what is not clearly being shown as their priorities. And I think that's quite highlighted in a report. I kind of had to add this late because of the report that I saw last week, which I'm sure all of you saw, which was the survey by the Canadian Federation of Independent Business that surveyed farmers and agri-food businesses across the country. And the survey results, I think, are quite stark and quite alarming. When you have 9 out of 10 agri-food business owners saying Liberal red tape and regulations are putting Canadian agriculture at risk. That's the headline on the CFIB survey. When you have the foundation of Canadian food security saying we can no longer do business in Canada because of the red tape and regulations. And CFIB put a number on that, at $51 billion this is costing Canada's economy. And 18 billion of that 51 can be directly attributed to red tape. But there was another stat from that survey which I found the most alarming. 90% is a big number. But when you have 70% of Canadian farmers saying they are advising their kids not to take over the family farm, that is an alarm bell. If we do not have that next generation taking over the family operation, that is putting Canadian food production and Canadian food security at risk. And this isn't rhetoric. These are the facts that we are getting back from farmers and agri-food business owners themselves. We cannot keep going in this direction. Otherwise, when we drop from number 5 to number 9, that number is going to continue to decline. When 70% of those businesses say their ability to be productive and grow is hampered by this red tape and regulation. And I don't think this would be a surprise to anybody in this room that agri-food businesses and agriculture is the most heavily regulated industry in our country. And I want to highlight, and I may have highlighted this last year, but I think it's important to reiterate it, that the Farm Critic Canada's report last year had shown that typically Canadian agriculture grows at about 2% annually. But over the last decade, our 2% growth has been reduced to 1%. And a big reason for that is that regulations and red tape, CFIA, PMRA, lack of labor reliability, issues in the supply chain. But if we are able to get that annual growth back to that 2%, we will see that number of our ability to export food go back up to close to that top 5. But we also will see another $30 billion in cash receipts for Canadian farmers. $30 billion. That's what we're missing out on. And I'm sure in your presentations over the last day or two, and a word that's been coming up a lot, certainly I was at Biofuel Summit in Calgary last week, and the word that kept coming up was opportunity. We have these opportunities, but we keep missing these opportunities. Well, that's going to continue to happen if we don't change the trajectory of Canadian agriculture and start speaking loudly and clear about the actual consequences that are resulting from not having agriculture as a priority. continuing to stand by and watch more regulations and more red tape being piled on Canadian agriculture and expecting you to succeed. And I think that's the most frustrating part for me as working with all of you in this room after the last number of years, is you know you can do it. And you know the opportunities and potential is there. In many cases, you just need government to get out of the way and let you do what you do, and you do it better than almost every jurisdiction on the planet. Okay, so how do we achieve that? How do we do that? How do we turn things around? Well, we can start by harmonizing those regulations and red tape. We can start by focusing on that research and innovation and hold CFIA and PMRA accountable for the decisions that they make and ensure that they are making those decisions with the lens of economic impact and food security. And we did a lot of this work at the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food as soon as we got back here this fall. We did a lengthy study on CFIA and PMRA specifically, but certainly focused on red tape reduction and harmonization of regulations. And I would say that the response that we had from those of you in the room who attended were quite unanimous again. And the single most frustration that came from just about every single witness that came there was the difficulty working with those two agencies, the CFIA and the PMRA. Whether it was beef, grains, pork, every single one of you that came there told us about the frustration that you were facing. We had a rancher from Nanton, a potato grower from PEI, a berry farmer from Nova Scotia, fruit and produce from Southern Ontario. All of them were telling us the same stories. Federal regulators are too slow, they're too cautious, but they're too disconnected from the realities of doing business. That's why it's important that we have that focus on economic impact and food security when these regulators are doing business with Canadian farmers. And I want to give you a couple of quotes from some of those who were at committee. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture told the committee that federal regulators play an important role in food safety, which is true, but they frequently make decisions without considering their effect on food security, food affordability, and economic impact on producers. Food Health and Consumer Products of Canada explained the regulatory burden has grown so heavy that now starting a business in Canada is hampering their abilities to do so. CropLife Canada was even more blunt. They said the PMRA's reform proposals were underwhelming at best and discussing things that have been discussed for years with timelines that are too far down the road and actually lacked ambition. Pretty stark comments from many of you who are in this room. So we had the leadership of PMRA and CFIA at committee. We also had the Minister of Agriculture, Heath MacDonald, there. And I'll give the minister some credit. He wanted to hear those recommendations. I think he agrees that these agencies need to be held accountable. So when we had the leadership of CFIA and PMRA in that room, I asked them directly, you've seen the recommendations that we have in this report. You've heard from the witnesses that have attended committee, and you've heard from the Minister of Agriculture. Are you now willing to realign your mandate to ensure every decision that you make is done so with the lens of economic impact and food security? Their answer was no. They think everything they're doing is just fine. And you don't have Liberal ministers right now that are willing to hold those agencies accountable to make sure they abide by the recommendations that you put forward, that we just articulated in that report, that the Minister of Agriculture agrees with, but is not showing the intestinal fortitude at the cabinet table to make those changes. Now, my last comments, and I'll take some questions, is, we talked about regulatory red tape, and we talked about the changes there in the CFIB report, but we also have the government shutting down 7 research centers. And again, as I mentioned, probably the number one priority for all of you in that pre-election meetings was the importance of research and innovation in agriculture. You wanted AAFC, if they was going to do anything, you wanted its focus to be in research and innovation. When more than 50% of the wheat varieties we grow here in Canada come from AAFC. We heard just today, we had the deans of the agricultural universities in Canada at committee talking about the impact that the closure of these research centers will have on Canadian agriculture. We had one of the most respected scientists in Canada also at committee saying, you cannot replicate this research and just move it around Canada and expect to get results that will benefit industry and producers. When you have someone like Lori Otway of the Western Crop Innovations telling you that the work that they're doing at the Lacombe Research Centre is one of the reasons why Canadian agriculture is moving forward and being successful. And closing these research centers, you can't just say, well, we don't have money in the budget. That's not an answer. That's a priority. When you have spent $33 million on a prison farm, $8 million on renovating a barn at Rideau Hall into a storage unit, by spending $19 million in AFC alone last year and consultants. Had you taken those resources and put them into the research centers, those research centers could run for a number of years just on those funds alone. So this isn't about not having money in the budget. This is about choosing one priority or another. And my Liberal colleagues, they'll say, well, we were told by the government we had to cut 15% right across the board. Well, my argument to you is, yes, we had to make some cuts. Everyone had to make some cuts in government. But over the last 10 years, the Liberal government has grown by more than 40%. The outlier is AFC. It has grown by 8%. So asking AFC to carry the burden of that 15% when it's only grown by 8% is unfair and shows you where their priorities are. There are absolutely cuts that could be made in this government. But cutting the pillar of Canadian agriculture is not where that should have happened. And again, friends, that is not rhetoric, that is the fact. But I'm asking all of you in this room, let's go back to what we talked about last spring. You laid out those priorities to me, to the Bloc, to the NDP, and certainly to the Liberals. Who is listening to you? Who is advocating for the priorities that you laid out last year? And who is clearly showing you they're not listening? I will do everything I can, as I promised, to raise these issues in the House of Commons at committee and question period. But I can't do it alone. Agriculture cannot continue to get along to go along. If that is going to be our attitude, the red tape is going to continue to be thrown on top of you. CFA and PMRA are not going to change. Research centers will continue to be closed. And trade markets and diversification will be difficult to access because we don't have reliable infrastructure and labor. Those of you in this room, you represent 190,000 farmers and producers right across this country. I need you to be vocal. I need you to be engaged. I need you to be loud, and I need you to demand better. And I don't mean that just for the Liberal government, I mean that for all of us. You need to demand better for those people who you represent right across this country. I'm listening. I hope you know I'm listening. But not everyone is. Folks, let's grow Canada. I couldn't agree more. Let's grow it by backing the men and women who have built this industry, the men and women who grow our food and produce our commodities. Let's grow Canada by harmonizing regulation, eliminating red tape, and taxes to make you economically competitive. Let's grow Canada by ensuring that our farmers and producers have access to the same tools as their competitors and our allies around the world. Let's grow Canada by standing up to unfair trade practices, non-tariff trade barriers, and tariffs. Let's grow Canada by ensuring that we have reliable labor and infrastructure to meet those markets. But let's also grow Canada by ensuring that you have a government that has your back and is listening to your priorities. Friends, let's grow Canada together and let's get to work. Thank you. All right, I'm ready for a question. Oh, you'll be okay. I don't need to. The slow walk.
I thought you did not want the questions. I was slowing down. Thanks for the presentation and demonstrating how you are listening to our interest. regarding research centers and the cuts that has been made, how can we propose some solutions in these circumstances? Could we try to have a bit more discussions, because we could propose how we would reduce red tape instead of cutting in infrastructures that are needed for us? Is there any options, notably having some consultation? We know that there are some investments that are made there, but there is also some returns, having copyrights where we have the ability to pay for some of these investments that we are doing. There are various ways. Is there a possibility where we can go further with this, avoiding the cuts?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Renee. It's a great question. And I'm not naive that we can turn this around, that we can keep these research centers open. I'm hoping if we get enough public pressure and public outcry that can still happen. These closures are supposed to be phased in over the next year or two. But I think you raised a good example, is we have to articulate the economic benefit of these research centers. Just for today as an example, we had the MLA for the Napan Research Center in Nova Scotia. She said they actually generate almost $500,000 in revenue each year in the sale of cattle. I didn't know that. We have to show the economic benefit, the impact on agriculture that these research centers provide. But I think the second thing is all of us need to come up with some ideas on where these cuts can come in lieu of closing these research centers. What are some other options in the bureaucracy, in other areas, other parts of the department? I think there's certainly we can find the money if we just put the work in. But I would say what's definitely happened through the two meetings that we've had on, sorry, I should have mentioned that we are studying these closures at Agriculture Committee right now. What has clearly been shown is the consultation, the due diligence on where these cuts should happen did not happen. This looks like this was a spreadsheet decision where they just looked at how do we come up with 15%, and this was the way to do it. So we're not giving up to your question, Renee. I think if we can come up with an economic argument of why these things should stay open and provide alternatives to where cuts could happen, and AFC would be beneficial. My second favorite person here today. I'm not going to say who the first one was. I'm not going to say which one of you I meant either.
Clearly he's talking to you. John, thank you for your passion for the sector. Just curious where the Conservative Party stands on some of the export diversification that's been talked about. And specifically China, where we've seen this sort of deal for canola. And I know your leader has been a bit hawkish on China in the past. So just curious where you stand on that. And maybe if you have time on Europe and some of their trade policies that are often quite ideological focused, and what you would do if you were in government around that question.
I appreciate the appeal. Thanks. Obviously, we support expanding our trade. When we came into government as Conservatives, we had trade agreements with half a dozen countries. When we were done, Harper had trade agreements with 50 countries. So I think we've shown our track record as strong. I think what we're asking for is now the Prime Minister is going to India. You talked about the EU. Our argument has been, okay, if you're going to sign these agreements, resolve some of the non-tariff trade barriers that have been there. So the EU, for example, in the United Kingdom, they're not taking Canadian beef and pork. So why are we signing a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom and fast-tracking them into the CPTPP without addressing these issues that are impacting agriculture? The same with India. We want them to go to India. We want a free trade with India. However, you also have to deal with the 30% tariff and 50% duties on Canadian peas and lentils. The same thing is with China. He came back and said, well, canola is now tariff-free. Beef is going in. Well, we all know now that it's only certain cuts of beef. And China's announced that they haven't made a decision on the tariffs on canola seed yet. They put that off to March. So you're saying these things have happened, but actually none of these things have happened. So we want these agreements, we want to open those markets. We know how important that is, certainly with what's happening with a very irrational and unpredictable partner down south. However, we want to see tangible results from these agreements or MOUs that have been signed. But we also hear I think you would also agree that we can't forget that 70% of our market is south of the border. And we need to work on that relationship. That is still the most important trade partner that we have. And to continue to poke the bear, I think is misguided. Certainly opening these new markets, I think, is a positive. We want those traditional or historical irritants to be removed, but also remember that we have to resolve the issue in our relationship south of the border. Yeah.
John, Stan Vanderwall from BC Agriculture Council. I'm thinking about some of the opportunities we're talking about, and opportunities only last so long. So you mentioned CFA, you mentioned PMRA. I'm wondering how you would advise us as the farmers when we're approaching government and how to make these changes, cutting the red tape that allows us to advance some of the things we're trying to harmonize different chemicals and pesticides, all those kind of things. What would you recommend? What would be your approach if you were in government? How would you recommend we go forward as a farmer to advocate those changes?
Yeah, I think there's two things that need to happen quickly. First off, and many of you have heard me give this analogy, I think CFA and PMRA are the children of divorced parents. If anyone is with CFA and PMRA in here, I don't mean that to you directly. I am the child of a divorced parent, so that explains a lot. But the problem is you have neither minister holding those two agencies accountable. You go to the Minister of Agriculture, he says, well, I can't really deal with that. You go see the Minister of Health. You go see the Minister of Health, so I don't really know what you're talking about. Go back to the Minister of Agriculture. It's we're going to get 2 Christmases, but you never get 1 Christmas. So that's first. I think they have to be CFIA for sure. As we said in the campaign, we would move that into agriculture, and you would have that minister hold that agency accountable and then realign its mandate. We've asked the Liberal government to do the same, and I think there is some move to try and do that. The second thing is in the previous government, Liberal member Cody Blois had his private members bill 358 to harmonize regulatory regulations with two trusted jurisdictions. That was a government bill that we support. I think many of you in this room stood with Cody when that was presented to the House. It never went anywhere. They could easily resurrect that. And maybe a conservative member will do that very soon. Hint, hint. So I think there are 2 things that could happen very quickly. Move CFIA into agriculture. Have a minister. Our idea was to have a minister of state deal directly with CFIA. And it almost doesn't matter where they are if no one's holding them accountable. You need a very strong minister, but you also need a culture change within that agency. No matter where I am in the country, CFIA is coming up every single time. And here's, I'll just give you this really quick story, but I have one of my grain millers in south of my riding phoned me the other day and said, one of my customers are getting all of their alcohol pulled off the shelves by CFIA. Like, what are you talking about? Well, they have a corn mash that they call bourbon, B-E-R-B-U-N. So it doesn't say bourbon. Well, CFIA is saying, well, you are misleading the consumer and that must be taken off the shelf. It's Bridgeland Distillery. My argument is CFIA said nothing about plant-based food calling itself milk, calling itself eggs, calling itself burgers. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But someone's obviously having a joke, naming their corn mash booze bourbon. That's all of a sudden a food security issue. Give me a break. It just shows you how misaligned and out of touch this agency has become. Sorry, that's my other rant for the day. Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate all of your time and all of your hard work. I am proud every single day to represent you and your members. Our door is always open, and enjoy the rest of your conference, and I'm sure we'll see some of you later tonight. Thanks very much.